Right, everyone, Klloo. So, safe to say Marlin definitely has some of my main attention when it comes to high seas, simply because of how her load interaction for her arrows works. So whenever you draw a card during your action phase, you may put an arrow from your hand face up into your arsenal. This means that it does have quite the potential for some combo shenanigans, which is what I really love to build, right? Whether or not they actually functionally work or they're easy to pull off, it's still something fun to try and strive for. So when it comes to Marlin, there are a few cards for us to zero in on, right? With Three of a Kind probably being the big one, but also potentially being the short-lived one, right? So for instance, try shot with Death Dealer. This allows you to load 2 arrows multiple times, right? Because you get the load off of Death Dealer's trigger, and then you get the load off of the actual card you draw. So safe to say, a lot of the excessive draw is thanks to New Horizon, right? But even without New Horizon, Death Dealer being a load and draw is still nice enough in itself, right? That, again, hopefully Azalea doesn't LL too quickly. But in terms of the new cards, we have like Loan Shark, generating a whole bunch of gold, even Big Game Trophy Shot being a load and a pump, right? Portside Exchange being a discard and then load, right? And the potential to generate gold, which is then another load on top of that. And then Fool's Gold, which if you can hit with Portside is just a double whammy, right? So altogether, with or without New Horizon, there is a lot of potential to go excessive, especially with a card like Endless Arrow, right? Where if you can get past your opponent's hand, you can have a board state that allows you to really capitalize on Endless Arrow relatively easy, right? So Perch Grappler, think of that. It's a pop 2, right? And then if we have gold, we're feeding in another card. So that's Endless Arrow and 2 cards, or Endless Arrow and a blue and Tunic, right? So 3 cards potentially to try and dismantle our opponent's hand, to then be able to get that first Endless Arrow over the top, to then just keep going with them, right? But where to start? I think we'll look at Three of a Kind first, right? So how excessive can we get Three of a Kind in a sense? So first off, when it comes to Three of a Kind, right? Again, the big impactful situation here is with Marlin's reload. So again, with New Horizon, that allows you to reload 2 arrows and gain 1 card to essentially pitch into those arrows. So that in itself is already excessive. You then tie into the fact that every 3 turns you have Tunic. Tunic then makes Three of a Kind free. That's already disgusting. But then you have other stuff like, for instance, gold. So gold or silver even on board allows you to then effectively play around the restrictions of Three of a Kind. So pretty sure the majority of us do expect Three of a Kind to, unfortunately, be banned out of the gate, right? So most likely in the upcoming ban, right? Prior to high seas, but you know, if it is around for a little bit, again, I would highly expect it's short play because it's such a high value card and it definitely goes strictly against what they've outlined, how they want draw interaction and essentially burst to work, right? But in terms of what we can actually do with it, right? So the gauge we're going to use is how big can we grow our hand, right? So in the sake of Three of a Kind, we play Three of a Kind, we then pitch our Copper Cog, and we're floating 2 resources. We now have 5 cards in hand. We can load through Marlin, only have 1 arrow, so we'll go Pathing Helix, and then we have Three of a Kind. So as long as you find something like Pathing Helix or Bolt and Shot, right, you're then able to reload Three of a Kind. If you don't find that, you find arrows, well then again, you have gold. So if you've stockpiled gold as Marlin, and there is a decent chunk of uncontestable gold generation in the set, then again, you sit on that gold stockpile and you have this really excessive turn where you've done normal arrow things, you've probably cracked your Perch Grapplers, right? You've exhausted your opponent's hand, and then you continue to go, right? So in this scenario, though, we can crack our Perch Grapplers so that we can continue with our Pathing Helixes, not using Bolt and Shot since Bolt and Shot requires a pump, but again, Rain Razor exists. That's another excessive card that, again, when thrown into how wide Marlin can potentially go, is definitely a worrisome threat, right? Again, Rain Razors, Perch Grapplers, gold on board, bunch of arrows. That's all you really need to really just have a home run turn. But Pathing Helix hits, so then we can load up Three of a Kind, and we're right back where we started, right? So far, nothing gained, but also nothing lost, right? We've sent 4, that's about it, right? But we can then pop Three of a Kind, and our 4 card goes back up to 5, we load, and now this is where we start getting value. So 4 Three of a Kind. If we can get past 2 Three of a Kinds in that sense, then we're actually growing in our hand size, right? So again, for the combo sake, that is what's really important, is how many things do we have to line up in order to actually make it excessive. So we end up with a nice 6-card hand, right? With Three of a Kind, 1 resource floating, and that could have, again, translated to arrows, or even in this scenario, we still haven't used our bow. So we have, again, a decent chunk of onboard triggers to then still profit off of what we've done with Three of a Kind. Right, the next card we have to look at is going, again, to an older Tri-Shot. So, Tri-Shot allows you to reuse your bow multiple times. It won't work with the new bow since it counts activation rather than the new tap/untap mechanic, right? But with Death Dealer, that means if you have a card, again, like Endless Arrow, and you make it stick where you are getting this across and you return it to hand, you're getting that pure draw value. So even without New Horizon and the double load that Death Dealer offers, what we can then do, again, thanks to Endless Arrow, right? So we pitch, we load, we draw a card, in this case it's Tri-Shot, play Tri-Shot, we have 2 more activations. Then, as per usual, perch Grapplers, and then our Endless Arrow, if it sticks, we get it back, and then we can continue with more Death Dealers into, you guessed it, more Tri-Shots into more Endless Arrows. So although we've shrunk our hand, we're going to grow it essentially straight back, right? So we're maintaining current cards, but we have a ton of charges on our Death Dealer, along with, again, easy to float resources, thanks to being blue. Marlin is going to be predominantly blue, right? We're seeing a lot of blue favoritism in high seas, which is definitely going to do wonders for the sake of combo, because pitch is generally the big hurdle, but now we're finally getting into a positive sense of our hand. So, Endless Arrow, draw, load, Endless Arrow, draw, shoot, and we'll return to a 4-card hand thanks to stacking our Tri-Shot. So, generally speaking, a lot of the cards that we are seeing work functionally by being played over and over again. So, for instance, the value off of 1 Tri-Shot, we just end up shrinking our hand, right? Because we can't then profit and recoup the value from Death Dealer. Same with Three of a Kind. Yes, it's a big boost and burst, but in terms of a combo sense, right, we're not actually returning cards to our hand because of the other hurdles it does impose. So far, nothing is essentially broken, right? But what about the new card? Now, I'm sure at this point, you get the value that Endless Arrow has, right? In it literally being endless, and it essentially counting for the arrow that you're loading, meaning that you just get the straight draw. So what if we get rid of it, right? So Loan Shark, for instance. If we play all 3 Loan Sharks, we generate a ton of gold. So this is essentially 6 loads for Marlin, but we can't actually really utilize it, right? We pitch, we draw, and that would be the end. If we load this and shoot it, that's our arrow. We can't make use of the rest of the gold. Even if we were to, again, triple play Loan Sharks and cycle through them all, eventually getting the profit card from 3 gold off of 2 blues, it means that we'd only return back to a 3-card hand, meaning that in the course of the turn, we've actually lost a card. So we haven't actually been able to profit anything off of Loan Shark. But the power of Loan Shark comes from, again, that setup stage where we just stockpile gold as Marlin and then end up using the draw triggers later on to have a very excessive turn. So, for instance, we have our 6 gold, and now we have a handful of pitchables, right? And we just pitch into our 6 gold, and this offers us essentially the opportunity to shoot 6 arrows. We'd have plenty of resources for our legs if we find Rain Razor, right? That's an extra 12 damage. That's huge. So, altogether, Marlin's ability to set up while also still doing damning things as Ranger is kind of scary, right? Again, we can shoot 6 arrows, and we have plenty of pitchables as well, so potentially what we're shooting could be a lot worse than it is, right? But you get the gist. So what about the other cards? So when it comes to our big game trophy shot and our portside exchange, right? So both these discard and draw, although in reverse orders. So big game is draw then discard, portside discard then draw, meaning that both act as a reload trigger, but they also have the opportunity to create gold, especially in conjunction with a Fool's Gold. So for instance, portside. We play portside, and if we discard Fool's Gold, we get 2 gold, right? Meaning we spent 1 card because of the draw to get 2 gold, meaning it is equivalent to Loan Shark, right? Now, big game trophy shot, similarly, we have to pitch for it, but we get a +4, so that sort of evens out. Discard Fool's Gold again, and we get gold, right? So we've now created 5 chances to reload off of those cards, right? So either excessively setting up a whole stack of gold, and there is gold disruption, but I don't think potentially enough. And again, this type of playstyle is beautiful to me, right? It's what I like to do with Melody, and now I can do it with Marlin. So the idea of just trying to rack up a whole ton of gold to then let loose a volley of arrows with, again, the onboard pieces being Perch Grappler, right, is pretty nuts to me. But, right, again, none of these by themselves are all that excessive. So, you know, what if we put some of them in conjunction? Now the fun part. How excessive of a turn can we make? Well, we'll start with the setup. So we have Portside Exchange with our Fool's Gold, which in the scenario of hitting Fool's Gold is actually better than Loan Shark, right? Because we'd also get the reload off of Marlin, right? I just don't have an arrow because basically we're just setting up a whole bunch of gold. So this will net us 6 gold, beautiful, and then a load. So endless arrow goes face up and 6 gold set up into our loan sharks for another 6 gold. So loan shark, loan shark, loan shark, right? But loan shark doesn't actually get you a draw, it just gets you 2 gold. So to some extent, I'd say port side extortion. Is it extortion or exchange? Exchange. It's not that rough. Portside exchange is better in Marlin than Loan Shark, right? Because again, you're getting the possible gold and the load, whereas you'd have to pay an extra 2 into Loan Shark to get the load off of the first gold, right? So I think it's a little bit better. But we'll pass. We'll stash our Rain Raids alongside our Endless Arrow and let the fun begin. So how much damage do you reckon this will amount to, right? Mind you, we have again 12 shots thanks to our gold. We have 3 Rain Razors, so that's already 6 by 12, right? Plus then all the other shenanigans we can throw in there. So, of course, we'll crack our Rain Razors first and foremost. Beautiful. Crack our Perch Grapplers, and then let the fun begin. Now, obviously, I have floated this Endless Arrow in my arsenal for 2 turns. That's not something that is easily done, right? So, sure, our opponent can definitely disrupt that. Second, we're doing it first and foremost, meaning that our opponent has the opportunity to shut it down. It's a nice big 10 Endless Arrow, so they'd have to give a lot to shut it down. But, again, we have the 12 gold. So off of the Perch Grapplers, we're still 1 card in hand, meaning that we could use our gold to cycle and try and find something. Find potentially, I think, about 1 arrow before we go into Endless Arrow, where we have to extract that value, right? Or you could also just use gold to get back a positive hand sense to make up for the Rain Razor that we played. So every 3 gold, you net a card, right? Off of blue, of course. Meaning that there are lots of ways to, again, make this consistent. But again, we're here for the fun. We want the maximum damage. So 10 Endless Arrow to begin with, right? And then with our 1 floating resource, we can go 3 of a kind. So then lets us load our Endless Arrow and our Bolton Shots, since we get 2 triggers with New Horizon. Then we can do Endless Arrow first. Make sure we always do it first. Then Bolton Shots, so we get the reload. And that allows us to load our 3 of a kind. 3 of a kind with our Pitchfork gets us, you guessed it, another Bolton Shot, another Endless Arrow, and a 3 of a kind. So we continue the cycle, and every 3 of a kind is currently doing 20 damage. That, again, is pretty crazy, right? Now, it's hard to say exactly which portion of any of this is to blame. Again, it's combo. So trying to get it off exactly as I'm doing it right now is definitely unrealistic. I do think the gold probably speaks for itself, just the amount of gold you can rack up as Marlin, right? While still doing other Ranger things to then go into an excessive turn is going to be interesting to see where exactly it lands. But anyway, 3 of a kind again, 2 more loads, so a Bolton Shot and an Endless Arrow. Then we can go Endless Arrow, and then we're on to Tri-Shots. So Bolton Shots, load up our Tri-Shot, get our Death Dealer charges, and then since we have the Endless Arrows, Death Dealer, load twice, so draw and load, get us some more pitchables, and another whopping 20 damage per go, right? Death Dealer again, pitch a pitchable, load our 2 Endless, and we still have not touched our pile of gold, right? But this should be the last chance, so we do have to move over to the gold. Death Dealer, load, load. Beautiful. And then we have 3 copper cogs to basically draw excessively with our gold. And just like that, our hand is racked right back up, right? So now we want to load Endless Arrow first, since we don't have another Tri-Shot just yet. That should come here, I believe. Beautiful. So now Bolton Shots. Bolton Shots then loads us a Tri-Shot. Beautiful. Tri-Shot gets us more Death Dealer charges. Death Dealer gets us more Endless Arrows, and the cycle of damage repeats, right? And we're basically just fishing for the last Tri-Shot, which I believe should be off of this gold. Yeah, beautiful. So Bolton Shots, into another Tri-Shot, into our last charges of our Death Dealer, right? So another 3. Beautiful. That was the wrong card to pitch. Let's try that again. There we go. Endless Arrow, Endless Arrow, and then just a whole bunch of gold, right? So we have 2 resources floating, meaning that we will get back to positive, right, off of blue. So Endless Arrow, shoots, 2 cards in hand, meaning we go gold, pitch, draw, shoot, and the cycle repeats a nice 7 more times, right? So yeah, this definitely puts to shame the other Endless Arrow combos, right? I think I had a Riptide plays his old deck as well, Shenanigan, but yeah. The power of just stockpiling gold, again, with Perch Grapplers being a thing, is definitely worrisome, right? So 3 of a kind, I think definitely probably sees a ban. I know I shouldn't say definitely then probably, but yeah. 3 of a kind, right? Just again, because of how much value it offers with Tunic. But Perch Grapplers is definitely a curiosity, especially with the new Legendary. Because it's just a very, very open-ended turn, right? Especially with Marlin's new load. Even with Riptide, again, with the amount of traps you can draw, the resources you can get to, you could potentially do excessive things, right? It just wasn't as much of a risk of, again, just the face value of gold, floating resources in a blue-heavy deck, right? So even if you whiff, even then you get a yellow or a red if you have the resource of a blue, and you're doing something like Endless Arrow, where, again, the criteria is just getting through your opponent's hand before you start going into it, right? That 4 ping definitely lines up even without the Rain Razors in this scenario, right? And look at that. I didn't even realize, but we're out of cards to draw in the deck, so the combo could have definitely gone larger. But I think I get my point across, right? 268, so it's about level with some of our higher end combos. But yeah, so individually, I don't think any of these are disgusting, right? Loan Shark and our Portside Exchange just for the long term. Because again, you know, in a proper match, how wide do you have to go at that point, right? If you're sitting on 6 gold, and then you manage to go Perch Grappler's Endless Arrow. So that's 24 damage post whatever you've done for the majority of your turn. And that could be as simple as a debilitating arrow and some sort of pump, right? Especially with Death Dealer currently. If Azalea goes Death Dealer and the draw mechanic goes, then it definitely levels out a bit, right? You definitely don't need New Horizon. But yeah, in conjunction, the value from Endless Arrow, the value from Three of a Kind, right? Three of a Kind definitely has to at least being looked at by LSS. Endless Arrow with allies, it seems like it needs to stay, right? There's definitely not enough other cards to take over from it, right? And it's again, not excessive in anyone else. It's just, to me, the correlation of silver or gold in this scenario to then just beat over your opponent's hand and then this arrow them down, right? That's the type of trigger that LSS has shown they don't like being available, right? But yeah, we'll continue to have some fun diving into Shenanigans, right? At least till the set comes out, and then I will probably focus on actual, proper, competitive things, right? And get whichever hero I decide to play, because it's still up in the air. I definitely want to try out Puffin, but Marlin with Azalea, close to Alley, right? I got to get in my my Death Dealer fun quickly, right? And then maybe swap over to Puffin. But anyway, hope you enjoyed. Yeah.